Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Vantage Point on ITV. I'm your host Mohammed Choonara. Thank you for joining us this evening. With all news based on the ANC elective conference, which is due to start next week Friday, we decided to steer away from it this week, as we will be bringing you wall-to-wall coverage of the conference from next week. Remember, you can catch most of the days live on ITV. But in tonight's show, we're going to take a look at the Libyan slave crisis. We're going to remember Nelson Mandela and Ahmed Choonara. Instead of being a place of transit for migrants on their way to Europe, Libya has become a trafficking market where people are bought and sold on a daily basis for as little as $200. We interview photojournalist Nokiso Contreras, the recipient of the 7th Carminac Photojournalism Award, on his experience photographing the unfolding humanitarian crisis. Since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, Libya is still a lawless state where armed groups compete for land and resources, and large weapons and people smuggling networks operate with impunity. Please note that this video may contain scenes that may upset sensitive viewers.
I felt like entering into a surreal world, something obscure, something suspicious. Libya was very difficult to work on. My first visit was back in 2014, when I started photographing detention centers and the humanitarian crisis of migrants on transit towards Europe. But then I realized something big and important was unfolding, following migrants being trapped in between a tribal conflict in Libya. But we ended up then documenting human trafficking and slavery, which was shocking for all of us. When migrants, for instance, are taken into detention centers, the militias ask for ransom to release them because they don't have money to pay the ransom. Then they end up working for free, so they became slaves. For such a sensitive topic, access is the most difficult thing to all places, to all characters. During the first 2-3 months of the project, we gathered just a few images, but then we got contact with smugglers in the south, we got contact with militias in the north, we got contact with key characters that made possible to gather these testimonies, to gather these photographs. You're taken by hand by these characters to look, to have a glance into their world. So when you have a hole to go through, you just don't think twice, just take the chance. But then it's important to keep a balance in your mind of what you are photographing, what you are documenting. The topic is sensitive and violent. We don't need more violence to explain that is violence. And there are things that you cannot include because non-respectful of the characters or could be taken wrongly during the narrative. But when I got the last picture of the project, when she got undressed, she wanted to show me a scar on her belly, and that scar was an abortion practiced on her. So for instance, that picture was important to include in the project because she somehow became an icon of the wars that you can go through in these detention centers. Being a woman, being raped, being migrant, being black. I would have liked to go back again and again, over and over, to get more images. especially the ones from the sea. Nobody knows, nobody has a clue about what happens in the sea. A powerful armed militias control the sea. The sea is the black hole of Libya.
Truly, truly shocking scenes, and let's hope that this issue is dealt with sooner rather than later. As we wind up the year, 2017 was this very sad year for many South Africans as the country lost one of its stalwarts. Mohammed Choonara sadly passed away in March this year, and the next clip is a short reminder of the life of this giant of the liberation struggle.
In 1929, Mohammed Choonara was born into an Indian family in Schweizer-Reneke, where apartheid was the law of the land. At a young age, Kathy joined the struggle for liberation, risking his freedom for the rights for all South Africans. He ultimately faced the death penalty alongside Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu.
Kathy has been in every major political trial until he landed in jail in the Rivonia trial. 1946, 1950, 1952, 1956 treason trial, you name it, every national trial Kathy has been involved.
They were sentenced to life in prison and were sent to Robben Island. People the world over called for their release.
It was a microcosm of how apartheid applied in South Africa. I stayed in the cell for 17 and a half years. If you stood here and looked out, not only can you see Cape Town, which is quite a distance, but the warders going to the harbor with their kids, that was the advantage of the cell. The main deprivation was children. You miss children. Mr. Mandela saw his two little girls when they were 2 and 3. Right. The next time he saw them was when they were over 16. A prisoner never loses hope. Never, ever. Although we were sentenced to life imprisonment, and for political prisoners, life meant life. We want Robben Island to be a monument. One wants to perpetuate the positive aspects, and that is a place of triumph. Because Robben Island played a very important role in the struggle, although we were in prison. And the struggle to crush apartheid was in some ways less difficult than the struggle we are facing now.
After 26 years, Kathy and his comrades walked free, infusing the struggle with new hope.
I was waiting for him. I had waited long, and we met again. It was a moving experience, and became very clear that nowhere in the world the human spirit can be destroyed by a tyrant or an oppressor.
6 months later, Nelson Mandela was also a free man. They negotiated an end to apartheid and set to work building a new nation. Prisoner Mandela became President Mandela. With Choonara as his advisor, they chose a path of truth and reconciliation over revenge. Old comrades worked with young leaders to make their highest ideals the law of the land. Kathy taught people in South Africa and around the world about the history, triumphs and lessons of the journey to freedom. He is a vigilant champion of ethical standards and of racial equality.
He has been a great instrument of the movement. That is what he has brought. Confidence in the future.
I found him to be a great fountain of wisdom.
He is a selfless person. He's made an enormous contribution.
You know, he connects to the issues that affect us as ordinary human beings.
He has contributed significantly to our rainbow nation.
Mohammed Choonara remained core part of the leadership of our struggle at the time.
Freedom to be achieved has to be fought for, has to be sacrificed. There has to be sacrifices. Freedom you don't get on a platter. Nobody has given freedom on a platter to anybody. It has to be fought for.
They had passion for what they were doing. They didn't do it for name and fame.
South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white.
They were very brave to make the kind of sacrifices that they made.
We are deeply grateful that today we live in a lively democracy.
But he's so warm and he's so humble for a person of his status and his legacy.
You'd expect someone of his stature to actually be proud and, you know, he'd want to be praised, but that is not who he is.
He's basically teaching us about non-racialism.
There's an incredibly good heart in Kathy that I think most people recognize and respond to. And, you know, that is a privilege to live with someone with such a good heart.
His life is a legacy of an ongoing example of the unbeatable power of love and the triumph of the human spirit.
We make dua to the Almighty to grant the marhum forgiveness. On that note, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Vantage Point. The 5th of December marked 4 years since Nelson Mandela passed on. Madiba was the light of our young democracy, and looking at the crisis that the ruling party finds itself in today, we all wish we had another Madiba in our midst. The next clip is titled Mandela in his own words. Take a look.
I have committed myself to the promotion of peace in the country. The ANC is concerned to address that problem and to find a solution which will suit both the blacks and the whites in this country. It will forever remain an indelible blight on human history that the apartheid crime ever occurred. It will forever remain an accusation and a challenge to all men and women of conscience that it took as long as it has before all of us stood up to say, enough is enough. When distinguished leaders came together half a century ago to consign to the past a war that had pitted humanity against itself, the ruins and the smoke from the dying fires were the monument to what should not have been. The United Nations has to reassess its role, redefine its profile, and reshape its structures. It should truly reflect the diversity of our universe and ensure equity among the nations in the exercise of power within the system of international relations in general and the Security Council in particular. Very right to be human is denied every day to hundreds of millions of people as a result of poverty and the unavailability of basic necessities such as food, jobs, water and shelter, education, health care, and a healthy environment. As I sit in Kunu, my village, and grow as ancient as its hills, I will continue to entertain the hope that there has emerged a cadre of leaders in my own country and region, on my continent, and in the world, which will not allow that any should be denied their freedom, as we were, that any should be turned into refugees, as we were, that any should be condemned to go hungry, as we were, that any should be stripped of their human dignity, as we were. We can at last look upon our own country as one in which citizens, regardless of race, gender, or creed, share equal political rights and opportunities for development. We do so with great gratitude towards the millions upon millions all around the world who materially and morally supported our struggle for freedom and justice.
When I told one of my advisors a few months ago that I wanted to retire, he growled at me, quote, "You are retired. If that is really the case, then I should say, I now announce that I'm retiring from retirement." My family and advisors have warned me not to tell my favorite story about arriving at heaven's door, knocking, providing my name, and being sent to the other place. Apparently, that story makes too many people morose. Nobody present here today will accuse me of selfishness if I ask to spend time while I'm still in good health with my family, my friends, and also with myself. It is music and dancing that makes me at peace with the world. And at peace with myself. But I don't see much movement at the back there, you know? I would like us to join. Let's just repeat. Let's just repeat it.
That's all we have time for this evening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to tune in again from next week as we go all out for the ANC National Conference. From all of us in the team, have a wonderful week. Until we see you next week, fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.